Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our first ever Critical Conversations panel tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You also have time to still come into the building if you'd like to be a part of this conversation. This summer, we are starting a series of panel discussions called Critical Conversations. This is where we invite special guests to come in to have candid conversations about topics that not only impact the church, but our communities as well. So we will host these conversations throughout the year, and we'll invite you every single time. If you have topics that you would like to discuss during this time, we ask that you send them to info@calvaryforward.org. Today's discussion, we will focus on student mental health and the mental health of our staff and how our communities can show support. I'll turn it over to our moderator, Elder William Guy.
Awesome. Thank you, Candace, and certainly welcome everybody that's joining us on this evening. So here, as with our panelists, we have Bishop Thomas, Senior Pastor of Calvary Baptist Church, and we also have our special guest, Dr. Cade, Chief Executive Officer and Superintendent of Capital School District. So certainly excited to have both of them here with us. I'll be our moderator tonight. I'll jump in and give some thoughts as well throughout the night, but I'll certainly be moderating. Before we get into our session tonight, I want to remind the community, if you are watching this, of our Back to School Community Fair. So our Back to School Community Fair will take place on August the 13th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. So right here along Fulton Street, right here at Calvary Baptist Church. A lot of exciting things. So from 9 to 10, I'll just kind of walk through the schedule. 9 to 10, we'll be serving breakfast to parents as well as students. And then at around 10:15, we'll start our pep rally. Pep rally will have some of our Capital School District leadership out there. We'll have some of our senior pastors of the different host churches. And then also we'll have a live performance by our very own, right here in Dover, Delaware, group called Torn Straight. And so they'll do an amazing performance for us to get the kids all pumped up and everything as well. Right after that performance, we'll allow the kids and the parents and everyone to go pick up their book bags. We'll have some food out here, and we'll also have a lot of vendors that's going to be at this event as well. So the supplies is definitely while supplies last. But again, our Back to School Community Fair will take place on August the 13th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Breakfast starts at 9. Pep rally starts around 10:15. And then after that, we will just go in and you guys will be able to pick up your book bags and check out our vendors and get some food as well. All right. Well, I'm so excited. A month ago or so, we were sitting in the office and, I don't even know where this conversation started from, but it was like, we need to start doing something a little bit different so that we can directly address the different challenges that we may see within our local community. And mental health is a huge area of some of the challenges we see. There's so many different certification courses that we've been taking a look at, and I remember being at a town hall on mental health for Capital School District. You guys were talking about that as well. And so with the Back to School Community Fair coming up and back to school right around the corner, we thought this should be the topic that we touch on first. And we're like, well, who should come and be a part of the panel? I was like, wait a minute, Dr. Cade. And immediately reached out to you, and I certainly appreciate you getting right back with me as well. So let's go ahead and jump in. So we have a few questions, but again, like we usually do for our Bible study, if you do have questions, you can send them online. Our team will get them up here to me, and we'll be able to fill those questions as well. So here's our first question, and we're going to kind of go a little bit back and forth conversation with Dr. Cade and Bishop Thomas, and some will be mixed up as well. So Dr. Cade, just kind of speaking in regards to last school year, and you can go further back if that 2 years ago as well, but how was, if you kind of had to assess the mental health of our students last year, and then if you can go into the staff, how was the mental health of our students this past year?
Well, first and foremost, Bishop, let me just thank you and your team and Reverend Guy for inviting me this evening. This is absolutely a very important conversation for our community to have because there seems to be a stigma around mental health in many communities, and I can only speak to the Black community because of my own personal experiences.
Yeah.
We certainly saw an uptick in mental health issues. The Center for Disease Control has indicated that 37% of our high school students reported poor mental health. 44% reported that they persistently felt sadder or hopeless during the last school year. And this is data from 2021. 1 in 5 Americans will experience a mental illness in their lifetime.
Yeah. Wow.
More than 50% of us will have an episode with mental illness, and these are statistics according to the Center for Disease Control. So when our students returned, we saw the unfolding of the impact of the school shutdown and the isolation, right? We saw even symptoms in our staff. You know, last year we had about 3 staff that we had to call for emergency supports to because they were in crisis, right, at work.
Wow.
So the unfolding of those symptoms from the trauma that our students have experienced and our staff has experienced, and our parents, you know. We had parents come in, and we saw a lot of unfolding of that trauma and mental health issues, more pervasive than in the past. I had one principal exit the district, and one of the issues that they cited was the uptick, the significant increase in parent outbursts in our buildings, right? The principal said that parents would come in, maybe they would have an episode, maybe once a month. It was several times a week right now, the trend, right? So we absolutely saw this, and so one of the things that we did was we saw the increase in altercations with kids, but it's those kids that are quiet, right? That withdraw, you know, disengagement is just as serious as kids who come in and express symptoms of mental health issues. So we have been preparing for this, and we have Dr. Jocelyn Brown, who's the supervisor for instruction. We have a multi-tiered plan that really addresses mental health issues, and so we started that Trauma and School Connectedness Task Force as a result of the unfolding of some of the issues that were absolutely related to mental health issues. So, so absolutely an increase.
And I appreciate how y'all got after it, right? So I remember going to the town halls and seeing the task force, and even, you know, the flip charts up there, and different people writing things down, and the repeat task force as well. And those are one of the questions we'll touch on later, but I appreciate how you guys got after it. It wasn't, what are we going to do? It was immediately getting people engaged. And even like you were talking, Dr. Brown, bringing her in as well. And I think even she had the ability to reach out to the community and say, let's prepare some persons for that as well. Bishop, anything before I do have a question for you, Bishop, but before that, just.
Well, I appreciate you, Dr. Cade, for being here. I think we can all if we all do this together, I think we can do a much better job through our partnerships. So we appreciate you for being here. I want to particularly thank you for being on top of it and being proactive and not reactive. We know we have a lot of brokenness in our communities in particular. We know COVID has done us an injustice more so than it has done any other communities. Communities of color have been directly affected. So for you to be proactive in making sure that there are support systems in place for not just our students but our staff says a whole lot and speaks volumes about your leadership. So we do appreciate your leadership and what you bring to our community for that. And that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, and you did address it, and that is what resources are available on site, because we know that as our children come back to school, they're coming back traumatized. They're coming out of abusive homes. They're coming out of dysfunctional homes. They're coming out of homes that are struggling. below poverty lines, not having adequate food, all of those kinds of things. So how are we, so we have services on site. That's what you're saying to us.
Yeah, so one of the things that we did as a district was we were thoughtful, and I really speak to Dr. Brown's leadership, because I believe the work in our district around trauma-informed training and understanding the impact of what that does to our children and their brain development is one piece, but what the symptoms and what behavior means, right? So we, in preparation for the reopening of school, we increased mental health supports at each of our sites. We had a licensed clinical social worker, right?
Okay.
We also had behavioral crisis interventionists, in addition to family crisis therapists at particular schools that the state provided for us. And we thought that that was very important for the support. We had a plan where we offer virtual therapy to families, to kids, and to our staff, right? So we have a virtual licensed clinical social worker who is available to support anyone in our community, right? Meaning our students, our staff, our parents, even community members, if you're in crisis or if you need therapy. As a part of our plan, we increased self-care opportunities for our staff. There were many opportunities for mindfulness pieces, right? There were virtual cook at home with your family, paint parties, right? Because our staff are also facing these challenges, opportunities for parents to come with their child virtually and do different things, and then on site once things started opening up. And so I think this is very important that we have a multi-tiered plan of support for students, staff, and what we say parents with community. In addition, we have at Dover High School a wellness center that is staffed with psychologists and clinical people and people to address health, physical health and mental health. We have counselors at every school, right? So we had layered supports for our students and our staff and our parents. Next year, we're very happy and we're excited at East Dover Elementary School. We have received a grant in partnership with Nemours, and they helped to open up another wellness center. And we're right now writing a grant to do the same thing at Town Point Elementary School. And so as we move forward in our journey, and people say, what is she talking about, spurring the audacity of hope? Spurring the audacity of hope has to do with understanding that disproportionately members of under-resourced communities during the pandemic were hit harder, right? There was a higher death rate, a higher mobility, death rate, sickness rate, and more people who got sick died from the pandemic in low-resource communities and in African-American and Latina communities, right? And so understanding that disproportionality was a part of our preparation. But as we move forward, one of the visions that I have for the district is to develop partnerships with local community-based organizations, mental health organizations, various different kinds of organizations, to develop wraparound services is a term that we use in education. And we usually do that through partnerships, but I want to see our schools evolve as community learning centers so that they assume the role as being the hub of their local communities. And there's a very famous African-American psychologist named Dr. James Comer. And you can look up Comer, C-O-M-E-R, Dr. James Comer, and he talks about community schools. And that schools, and it was a quote by, I think it's Harry Edwards, that says, education takes place in the combination of the home, the school, the community, and the receptive mind. So the job of educating our kids has changed drastically with the pandemic, where you mentioned, Bishop, the work that we had to do to feed our families.
Right.
1 in 5 kids in the state of Delaware deal with food insecurity, right?
Yeah.
And so some of our schools have food pantries. And in many cases, we partner with churches, different organizations to provide food to families. We have a backpack program where some kids take a backpack of food home.
Wow.
So we understand the importance of having those partnerships. We as educators, we can't do this work alone. And somehow our job has changed very drastically, where we talk about the holistic needs of our children.
Right.
One of the things that I want to be very clear about is it has to be the holistic needs of our staff and our parents with community too. Because a kid in crisis is a family in crisis.
Exactly.
That's right.
And everyone has been impacted by this pandemic, including our staff.
Right.
And so we have to take care of all of the members of our community.
Right.
That's awesome. There are a lot of the resources, some of them I knew about or I heard about, but I'm glad to hear you actually kind of really expound upon it so that our community can hear this. So I know we have some persons that's in the room, so usually what we do during Bible study, if you do have a question, just raise your hand and our media team to either get you like an index card or something like that, and we'll be able to field those questions. For those that are watching online, again, welcome. You can certainly submit your question online as well. Y'all were talking about it, but I'll still throw the question out there. Bishop Thomas, so it's really kind of shifting to the local church community support of the school, but how can the local church or communities assist students and staff navigate through these mental health challenges?
I think we can talk about that from several different perspectives. First of all, I think as a church, we have to be on the front lines of addressing the issue of mental health, because some of the same children that are going to our schools go to our churches.
Yes,
same
indeed.
families that are involved in our school system are part of our churches. And so I think when I say from two different perspectives, I think, first of all, we have to think about it from a theological perspective. And that's for us, and you think about the ministry of Jesus. The ministry of Jesus was always about caring about the whole person, not just their religious needs, but their mental needs and their physical needs. So from a theological perspective, I think when we talk about mental health, we have to talk about it from that premise as well. But then historically, the Black church in particular has always been on the front lines of caring for our people and caring for our communities. We have to remember, it really wasn't the government, if you will, or healthcare agencies, if you will, that invented hospitals. That started in the church. If you check historically, that started in the church. It's no accident that the first hospital in almost every country in this world was started by Christian missionaries. And so we've kind of always been on the front lines of making sure that we're taking care of the holistic needs, of our people in our community. And then the last part of that is when people are in mental health crisis, where is the first place they go?
Church.
They go to church.
Absolutely. Church.
It's not them picking up the phone, calling a therapist or a counselor. They're coming to the church. They're calling their pastor. They're calling whoever their spiritual leader is. Because we know people need that kind of mental help at all times of the day and all times of the night. And so we have to make sure that we're equipped to do it here. And again, those partnerships are very important because we're not doing it in a vacuum. Our schools are involved because our children are there. Our churches are involved because they're in our communities. Our families are involved. As she said, when our children are in crisis, our families are in crisis.
That's right.
And so when we have a healthy partnership, then we can mitigate some of the damage that can occur as a result of having mental health challenges.
That's amazing. I thank you for walking through that to really talk about the importance of the church. It is very important with me working with some of the children and youth here and everything, and then all of a sudden you see them in the schools and just wondering how they're behaving in school, or do they behave the same way in the church. sometimes I'm kind of looking out in the audience, some of our children and youth staff out there. Don't the kids act better in church than they do at home? Sometimes, but no. But, you know, there is this, this level of what you were talking about, not just the theological aspect.
Right.
Right? Not just that I want you to know, you know, all the different scriptures or this, but am I paying attention to how you're doing mentally?
Right.
Am I paying attention to how you're doing physically? You know, do you look like you're hungry? And then, and this is the part that I really love about it, and I hear both of you talking about it, not just the children, but the staff and the parents as well. I think sometimes we do forget about that. You know, virtual sessions at home, you know, our focus is, yeah, make sure them kids get online. Well, who's at home making sure they get online?
Right, exactly.
And then who's on the other side of that camera, you know, who may also have kids, you know, that were taking classes from home or wherever they were as well. So I totally agree, and I certainly see that triad, or, you know, that triad, that you have the children, the staff, as well as the parents. And as a community, we need to wrap our arms around all three. And to include staff is not just the teachers that's in the classroom, but yeah,
Right.
just making sure that, you know, are you okay?
Yep.
Your leadership team as well. And then these counselors and these social workers. So we do have to make sure we're wrapping our arms around all of them.
And I think that the other thing is the stigma of mental health in the communities of color is another thing that we have to make sure that we address, because you know, when you start talking about mental health, what's the first thing people think? Oh, they're crazy.
Demonic spirits.
Right, demonic spirits, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's not the case.
It's not.
That is not the case. So when you think about what you're doing with your wraparound services and all that you're offering, I'm sure there's the educational piece of mental health, because some people are having mental health crises and don't realize it.
Yeah.
They have no way to identify it.
Yeah.
So there has to be, so how does that look?
Yeah, so we do threat assessments. You know, we have certain tools that we use, behavioral tools, in conjunction with our school psychologists and social workers, where we do different threat assessments. And one of the key things, and I talked about the training for trauma-informed care, that training in our vision is for every employee. It's not just for teachers or instructional people. It's for the bus drivers, for food service people. It should be for the custodians. It should be for people in our community.
Right.
Because once we're able to educate people on understanding the signs, right? And so you may not be trained to do something, but you absolutely can tell somebody, right?
Yes.
You can make the referral. You can seek out the help that you need in terms of identifying our young people. A child withdrawal, typically, and I know we're going to talk about school violence, typically what we know in the research, a lot of the kids who engage in school violence tend to be withdrawn.
Right.
They tend to be isolated. They tend to be disconnected and disengaged. And so when I say that, when we think about mental health issues, right, it's not just the kids that show the outward signs that we have to be concerned about. We have to be able to understand developmental milestones, right, in terms of what's appropriate for kids at different developmental levels. And we have to be able to triage, right? So teachers are not social workers, they're not psychologists, but they do take child development courses. And we are all mandated child abuse reporters, right?
Right.
But there are certain signs that we're looking for with young people that will help us. There was one other comment I wanted to say about the partnership between churches and schools. Partnerships are essential if we want to maintain our quality of life. You know, because what happens in the community comes to the schools.
Right.
And I was just thinking about historically the role that the Black church has played in our community. The Black church was the social service providers before FDR came up with social service programs. And so historically, people in our community, they trust the church. Right? Now, the school is hit or miss, right? So if you've had a good experience in school, you might have a good relationship. If you haven't had a good experience in school, and most of our kids who have struggled in school, we see that it's a generational thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So people in the schools come from outside of the community into the community to teach. The church is a consistent staple, right, that people rely on. And so I think that's important for us to understand why partnerships are so important, because people trust the church.
Right.
And this has traditionally, in the Black community, been the role of the church to lead social and political issues within the Black community.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing. As you're talking, I'm sitting here picturing, especially where our church is at, right? So we're kind of in the middle of some middle school is down the street, right? Not too far. Another middle school up the road, another elementary school and everything. So it's possible that the traffic of children, right, walking past our churches and the churches around here, we see. But like you're saying, for that church to be present and see that young person, right, doing something that's not right, we use this word, policing them, you know, in so many words, you know, getting them right, making sure that they are right, or if they're just roaming around the streets or they look like they need something, being able to call them in, hey, what you doing? You look like you just roaming around, you need something to eat or something like that. So I do believe, and my prayer is that as we come out of the pandemic, that the churches will be more present in the community, not just because something happens, but just be present so that our kids, as they're coming home from school, riding their bike, you know, whatever they're doing, the church is present in the community that connects. So it's like, hey, I can't do nothing around here that's not right. Because you got the school watching me,
Right.
then you got the church here, then the church here, I might as well go on home.
Yeah.
But the church begins to bridge the gap between school and home.
Absolutely.
Right,
It's that
to be
sense
that.
of community, right?
Yeah,
That ownership, that collectively we own our kids. And I wanted to make one other statement about what I call a three-pronged approach to ensuring we're meeting the holistic needs of students, staff, and parents with community. And it's just like you hear every time you get on an airplane. Put the oxygen mask on yourself first and help the person next to you.
Yeah.
Right.
So if our teachers and our custodians and our food service people are in crisis, they can't help our kids, right? And so one of the things I say to people, one of the more sobering moments that I had during the pandemic when I was serving as the chief academic officer in Ohio, in a very similar community, was seeing my staff, my food service employees who didn't get paid when schools shut down because they get paid by the hour. My bus drivers who couldn't drive buses because we weren't transporting kids, right? Seeing them at the food pantry in lines getting food. For me, that was a wake-up moment, right? That was an epiphany for me that if God gave me the privilege to serve at the helm of an organization, that it wouldn't just be about the kids, and it has to be about the kids because that's why we get paid, but it has to also be about the adults in that organization. Because again, if I don't take care of myself, I can't help anybody else, right? And if we don't give our staff the tools that they need, the support, the mental health support that they need, the tools that they need to do an effective job with our kids, then we might as well go home, right? It's unrealistic, right? And this pandemic has impacted everyone, right? So we can't minimize the implications that has for every adult that comes in contact with kids. And so for me, it's a no-brainer in terms of ensuring that we provide a certain level of care and opportunity to access for students, staff, and parents with community, right? And I'm very intentional about saying that because we have to do this work together. This is a collective ownership of our children, of our quality of life, right? Because when people in our community are suffering, it impacts our quality of life. And so if you don't want to do it for any reason, you do it because you don't want someone who has been impacted by adverse experiences to impact your quality of life, and that's why we have to have a sense of community and take care of each other.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's awesome. One of the next questions is about resources. And I know, Dr. Cade, you mentioned some of the different resources. And if it wasn't an exhaustive list that you discussed, are there any other resources that you want to talk about that, we kind of feel like our parents are not aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. So every year, parents, when you send your child to school, each of your children will receive what we call a student success guide of rights and responsibilities. And in this guide, it lays out for students their responsibilities and their rights, and parents. But in the back of that guide, we have a list of community resources, from Red Cross down to various different resources. And I was looking at it the other day as I was thinking about this. General resources: American Red Cross, Catholic Charities, Children and Families First, Delaware's Helpline. Right there in that book is a plethora of resources that are accessible to our families. In addition to that, you call our schools, you can ask for the nurse, you can ask for the social worker, and they will help you, right? We're here to help our families, right? And so if there's a need that's not an academic need, we want to be able to have a connection to an organization in our community. And again, whether it's Catholic Charities, whether it's NCALL, whether it's DEMCO, we have those relationships. United Way,
Right.
We have the relationships with community-based organizations. And, I'm excited about going over to Procter & Gamble next week, because I've been talking about work-based experiences for our kids, but also for our parents. How do we develop partnerships with businesses to increase the quality of life for our families also? Because when we increase the quality of life for a family, it directly impacts the outcomes with the kids that we're working for. So the Student Success Guide has all of the resources that you need. Call the school, ask for the social worker, the nurse, an administrator, the guidance counselor. We're all here to help our families. And so and when I think about resources, that would be my advice to families.
That's amazing. Because you do think educational resources, but all of those that are accessible, and I'm listening to you reading it, and I'm like, wow, I know that there are families at times that are sitting home that need Red Cross, right? That need those different resources and are just, I don't know, for whatever reason, they don't feel connected, they don't feel confident enough to reach out. But if they do feel confident enough to call the school and say, why, this teacher or whatever the case is, then be confident enough to call the school also and say, do you know, Catholic Charities, do you know how I can get in contact with some other resources to help us through this rough season that we're going to as well?
Yeah, so Bishop and I was talking when we were sitting in his office waiting, and so I absolutely will bring over some of those resources, because for me, for some of our families, and I come from an inner city, it's about the trust, right?
Right.
Some of them don't feel comfortable coming in schools, right? They feel intimidated. They don't want people knowing their business, right? And so the Student Success Guide is a way that you cut out the middleman, you look at the resources in the back, and you go directly to the source. And I think, for me, coming from a very large family, growing up as a ward of the state, and in fact, my mother suffered from mental health issues. My mother was schizophrenic, and that's why the state took me and my other 8 brothers and sisters away. So I understand personally, the implications, the stigma that goes with mental health issues in our community. So that relationship with the school as an institution sometimes is the barrier. But once our families can get inside and connect with one person or 2 people that they trust, if we create the kind of environment for them to feel comfortable coming in, it's so important. But Bishop, I will bring over some of the student success guides. I'll bring over some other materials so that you can have them in the church. And within that guide, you'll see there is a laundry list of community organizations, even to the Hope Clinic, right, where they provide free medical care for families, right? So from mental health to physical health to the food pantry, the Delaware Food Bank, we partner with them, the Rotary Club, or, you know, we have partnered with the Capital City Rotary Club to screen every 10th grade student starting this school year for sudden heart attacks. Like there's a certain, it's called sudden heart. It's like a heart attack that some kids have this defect in their heart, and it's a very expensive screening. But the Bay Health and the Rotary Club has decided that they're going to partner with us and pick up the cost, right, of this very expensive screening. And it typically, the malfunction starts at about 14, 15 years old. And so we're going to be providing that. It's those kinds of partnerships, right? You know, that many low-income, low-resource communities don't have access. We don't have access to the information, right? I think it was Lynn Bias, the basketball player, one of these that just dropped dead. And many times we have these lingering health issues, and it goes undetected, right? And people die. So we're looking if we can save one kid's life, and it was the former Senator Nancy Wagner who helped us, you know, get that program at our school. People was like, oh, she's a Republican. I don't care what you are. If you want to help my kids, you know, and I can say that Nancy Wagner has helped our students and helped me. I don't care about your politics. I care about your heart and what you bring to the table in terms of reaching our goals that we have. So I did want to give a plug for that. So that'll happen this school year.
That's probably a whole nother conversation, Bishop. I'm going to ask you about the members of churches and everything in a moment, but somehow we won't create partnerships because we on the two different sides of the aisle type of thing. You know, those different things as well, but there's all these resources. That's amazing. So I do want to say to those that might be listening online, of course you can listen to this again. If there's questions that you have, you can put them in the chat. But even if there's resources that's being mentioned and you're like, what was that? What was that Dr. Cade said? What was that Bishop Thomas said? You can put it in the chat and our media team will be able to grab that and then we can reach back out.
Yeah, I want to mention something again because you made a good point about how our roles are evolving. And I think that was important to mention because we're not just doing one thing. We're doing a multiplicity of things, but that's not foreign to us. That's not foreign to us because even in church, our pastors are not just our spiritual leaders, but they inform us prophetically, they inform us politically, they inform us socially. All of those things are happening, and I think that is just one of the unique things, and allow me to just say it like this, that's one of the unique things in the black community. We know how to multitask, and we know how to get things done. We might have one title, but up under that title, there's a whole lot of other stuff that's happening. So we know how to do this.
That's true.
And we can do this. But again, those partnerships are so important. And I think we've got to move past our petty differences, and I call them petty differences because they are. We've got to get past those things because we have people's lives at stake. We have people's future at stake. That's true. And our differences cannot be the reason that we see the level, and we're seeing it happen, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, before we leave today, the conditions of our communities, the violence. I'm sure we will talk about that. But we have to embrace what we know. We know how to do this.
That's right.
And we can get this done.
And I'm glad you said that, Bishop, because Dr. Cade, as you were talking, I was thinking like, wow, teachers. I remember substituting, and teachers were going back to school to get their master's degree in like elementary and secondary counseling and things like that. Well, they were like science teachers, And I was like, why are you going back, to get this? It was like, I need it. I need to know the symptoms. I need to be able to identify and know I'm not a licensed clinical, social worker or a licensed professional counselor. These teachers, are not. But you have to have your hand in a little bit of almost
Everything.
social work,
Yes.
counseling, teacher, a little bit of everything in order to connect and then if need be, refer, to refer the students on. But that's, so to our teachers and our staff and everything, thank you guys so much for what you do. Bishop Thomas, so after this question, I do kind of want to jump down a little bit and talk about, the shootings and all of that as well. But Bishop, so a lot of our churches, again, we have teachers and staff within our congregations. We've been their ear to kind of find out a lot of times. I'm thinking about one staff member that's here, and I often ask her, what's going on in them schools? Sometimes when we come for Bible study and everything. But how can the church better position itself to understand and meet the needs of students and staff again?
Again, I think we go back to this partnership. I think we've got to find out what the needs of our schools are. What is it that they need? Let's not assume we know. Let's have those conversations and find out and understand what those needs are. The second thing is in these partnerships, and I have to say this, let's not get caught up on whose name going to be on it.
Oh, that's huge.
Let's just get the work done. Just because I'm not in charge of it, or just because my church's name is not going to be on it, then I'm going to not be a part of that. I can speak for the church. I can speak, and we have to even get past that. We have to find out what those needs are. All of our churches are able to offer different things, but if we are able to come together and offer what we have a greater chance of plugging a lot of these holes that Dr. Cade has been talking about with us tonight. So find out what those needs are. Find out what we can do, what our individual churches are, what our niches are, if you will, what we can contribute to that process. And then, again, I'll say it again, let's leave our personal agendas at the door.
That's true.
Let's leave that at the door, because that's not helping the situation.
Right.
Again, get the work done. And then we have to build some authentic and trusting relationships. More than anything else, we have to do that. We're not going to do anything without strong relationships. We're not going to do anything without trusted relationships. So if we want to deal with all of this, we've got to be patient. We've got to understand that relationships take time to develop. We got to understand that we didn't get into this shape overnight. So it's going to take us a little time to figure out how to navigate this effectively, productively, in a healthy way. And we got to begin to work on it, from that perspective, understanding that. I know we live in a microwave kind of culture where we want everything to happen right now. But again, we have to, the best way to deal with an elephant in the room, as they say, is one bite at a time.
That's right.
It's one bite at a time. But we can get it done. We've got to begin to build that credibility with each other. We've got to begin to implement those partnerships, and we've got to get out of our own way in the process of doing that. And I think from our perspective, from the church's perspective, that's kind of the strategy for us being able to help the school.
Yeah, that's so good. I'm sitting here thinking about our Back to School community fair, and we were like, do students need notebook paper?
Right.
So it's just, we were chatting about it on our group chat, and we have all these organizations and churches partner. Do students need notebook paper? So like, I don't know. Then somebody was like, hold on, let me ask the school. And she reached out and asked like 3 to 4 different people, and then, we came to a conclusion of what we'll do. But Bishop, you're so right. Like, we can sit around all day long and have these brainstorming sessions of let's do this for the school and all of that, but it's like, why don't you just go ask the school?
Just ask.
What do you need? Because you can do a fundraiser or whatever it is, and we got a whole pile of pencils, and the school's like, we got like a whole busload of pencils. That's not what we need. We need erasers, whatever the case is. But So let me jump to this because we're starting to get questions from the audience online. So let me jump to the mass shooting situation and everything. So Dr. Cade and Bishop certainly jump in. So with the increase of mass shootings in our nation, what things can schools put in place to increase the safety of students and staff?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, what you should know is that every school has a safety plan. In fact, the Homeland Security people collect our plans annually, right? And so we do active training on drills. If there's an active shooter, if we have to have a lockdown, tornado drills, we do a plethora of drills around safety and security. What schools can do is make sure that our staff are trained on the front end and not on the back end. And I think in some cases this year, the Capital School District is actually one of the only districts in Kent County that has constables, armed people in every building, in every one of our schools we have. So we have to think proactively about safety and security, and we do that, right? So one of the things that we're doing, we collaborate with the Dover City Police Department and Police Chief Johnson. We collaborate with DEMA, Delaware Emergency Management Agency, and the new Secretary of Homeland Security, McQueen, who is probably the first African-American male Homeland Security Secretary for the state of Delaware. And so what we have to do to increase safety and security is stick to the fidelity of our plans. Oftentimes when you come up to a school and you're leaving, you'll let the person in that's coming after you. We don't need to do that.
That's good.
It's a safety risk. The reason why the shooter got into the school in Texas was someone propped the door open. We've got to stop propping doors open, right?
Come on.
Start securing our buildings and ensuring that we've had the training up front. And so knowing who's in our schools. We have security plans, we have security cameras, right? And so companies come, well, do you need a metal detector? Metal detectors deter, but they do not prevent guns from getting in schools, okay? Take it from me, the girl from New York City, in which all the schools have metal detectors. We still have guns in the schools, right? So, you know, having those plans, being proactive, educating our staff and our students and doing those drills on a different timeline is probably one of the most important things that we can do. And not having people come in the building, propping open doors and stuff like that. We have to stop doing that. One of the things we did in the Capital School District more recently, the state gives us security money. They give an allocation annually. So how we design our buildings, right? You know, we have to keep safety in mind. So typically now when you come into a school, if you go to Central Middle School, there's this holding area and then everybody's behind glass, right? Some of our older schools don't have that, right? And some of them we've built that. Some of them we're in the process of looking at that, because if someone gets in the building, then they have access to the whole building. So those holding areas is a way to slow someone down if they have bad intentions, right? So ensuring that we're doing that training up front. This year in the Capital School District, we're hiring an additional constable that's going to work on training and our timeline for training. On August the 23rd and the 24th, my team of constables, some administrators, and I will be going to unification training offered by the Delaware Emergency and Management Assessment Agency, along with our school resource officers. We have 5 school resource officers that work for the city of Dover in our schools also. And so one of the things that we do in schools is we do something we call ALICE training. And ALICE training stands for alert, inform people of a threat. We have different tools. I'm not going to sit here and give everybody our security plan. And compromise our safety, but ALICE training stands for alert, inform people that there's a threat, lockdown, Students and staff can choose, and then we lock them down, barricade when there's certain things that we do, inform, and then counter and evacuate. So there's specific trainings that schools across our nation, Alice is one of the leading trainings that we take. There's another one called Vapor and Rapture. There's different trainings. Now here in Kent County, we work very closely with neighboring districts, our local police agency, our statewide police agency, and of course, the Department of Delaware's Emergency and Management Association and Homeland Security people. So we're constantly, but one of our biggest things is being able to identify kids who may have problems. And again, it goes back to what the statistics say. It's those kids that may be withdrawn, who haven't fit in, are not fitting in. When you think about most of the mass shootings, you think these kids were bullied. So there's certain characteristics that go along with the profile of those who engage in mass killings and in these shootings in the schools. And so now, don't be offended now if you come to the school and someone is leaving and they don't just let you in, right?
Right.
You know, if you see a door propped open at a school and you're driving by, call the district officer, call the school and say, hey, I'm concerned, right? Because, so it's us together, and then we always say to kids and to our staff, if you see something, say something.
That's right.
Right.
That's
You know, one of the biggest things is we're our best security, right?
Exactly.
When we see something that's out of place, we say something. The issue with the student who had the firearm at Dover High School, another student saw it, and he said something. So before that student could even get in the building, we got that student and were able to apprehend him and get him the help that he needed. A lot of times our kids are dealing with issues in their community, so it's an issue of them trying to protect themselves, not that they're coming to do harm, but it doesn't matter. There are certain things that don't belong in schools. And so if you see something, say something is our biggest piece of security as each of us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad you said that, because a lot of times, and even the way I put the question is like, so what is the schools doing, right, to increase the safety? It's like, yep, all right, this is what we're doing. At the same time, it goes back to the community thing, and I love that. Bishop, I know you were talking, and Dr. Cade just kind of talked about kids in the community, maybe they're going through some things, but you were talking about community things as well.
And I think we have to understand, and I wrote down some notes about, with some statistics about, you know, firearms. This is a serious issue here. Death by firearm is a major crisis in this country. In 2000, I wrote down some notes, in 2016, firearms were among the top 5 leading causes of deaths for individuals between the ages of 1 and 44 years old. And that accounted for 38,658 lives in the United States. This is a crisis, and not just that, but for example, from 1999 to 2016, homicide victimization was the leading cause of death among African Americans ages 15 to 34, making it deadlier than heart disease, diabetes, malignant neoplasms, and HIV combined.
Wow.
So we have an issue, and we have to deal with the issue we have. And I think beginning to put those things in place, coupled with the mental health conversation, because we got to still talk about that part. As you said, you made a critical point that some of our young people with guns starts from a protective perspective. They come from places and spaces where they feel like they need to protect themselves, and of course that leads to some other things. And then you have to talk about the dysfunctional family system. You've got to talk about the sense of belonging, which gangs provide for children who come from dysfunctional homes. They find that welcoming aspect that they're not getting from home. They get that attention that they're not getting from home. So you have to deal with all of that. And I'm glad she said, I'm glad you made this statement. You were able to get the young person who had the gun and get them the help they need.
Yeah,
That's important.
it is.
Because there was something going on
Right, right.
that needed to be addressed. Sure, yeah, was it important that they had a gun in the first place? Sure it was. Was it important to get it under control? Absolutely. But there were some other mitigating circumstances that needed to be addressed.
Yeah,
So when you said, get them the help they need, that's important.
It is, yeah.
Because this didn't just happen.
Right, right.
It did not just happen.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have to begin to understand the seriousness of where we are and what we're doing, and how to best counter that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is amazing. You know, maybe a year ago, I'm trying to think, you know, we had a few of the young men from Dover High. I know my son plays sports with them and all that. And I know you were out there at, I think, actually, there was a recent one, you know, car accident one that happened and all of that, I think. Yeah, right. So all those different things and all of those, whether it's the gun violence or, you know, I lost somebody that I played basketball with or something like that, definitely impacts our kids. Sometimes they may act like it doesn't impact them, but it does. And it's like, how do they react? How do they respond? Some situations they're going to find somebody, you know, that got a gun, and now they, you know, I'm walking home, I got to protect myself type of thing. So I'm bringing the gun to school. So I appreciate this conversation of community. Kind of, again, going back again, it's not just with the child, it's not just with the staff, it's with the entire family. I'm calling it the triad, you know, as well. And then the community, not just the school, not just the church, but all these community organizations coming and wrapping our hand around it as well. So, Bishop, I know there was one final question for you. Before we get too far away of what you were talking about earlier, we had one question that came through, and it says, I think you touched on it, but how can the church proactively help the district in a hands-on, impactful way?
Well, again, I will repeat myself, conversation.
Yeah.
We've got to be having these conversations. We've got to find out what the needs are, and we've got to be able to speak to those needs. There's too many churches that do too many different things for us not to be able to all have something to offer to make this better.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I know that one of the things that I have as a goal this year for myself is to really formalize some of the partnerships that we have with churches. And I think there's a meeting that the Village is having, and the Village is made up of faith-based organizations, Divine Nine organizations, and one of the things that I'm asking members of the Village to do this year is to take five of our kids that have tremendous need, right, and mentor them, right, and go through our Connecting Generations training and mentor these kids. And so within the vision that I have around intentional reciprocal partnerships, right, is to meet with the faith-based community. And I started last year just, you know, I think it's important to have that ongoing conversation. I attend the Interministerial Alliance's social action meetings that are held down at City Hall.
Right.
I meet with the faith-based community and I bring them in at least twice a year. That's exactly it. Actually giving you, once you adopt a school, what are the specific needs of that school so that the impact of your collective efforts is meeting the exact needs that we have. And we're absolutely grateful for anything that the churches, that anyone does to support us. But I believe that collectively, that if we're more intentional about our efforts, then the impact will be greater, and the outcomes will increase, right? And so we're always looking for that impact. And so that is one of the goals that I have this year when I meet with the faith-based community. And I'll share with them my vision for the year, my priorities, my goals, and my job is to seek that help. So it's not just the faith-based community reaching out to us, it's me coming to the faith-based community and saying, hey, look, this is the need. It's a two-way street.
Right.
We both have a responsibility to work collaboratively on this. And so I would say that Bishop and all of the faith-based people here in Central Delaware and the city of Dover that I've interacted with have been more than generous, more than supportive. I've even worked with the Central Delaware Islamic Society
Yes.
and the Interfaith Committee also. So there's so many faith-based people here in our community because we represent a very diverse group of kids in the Capital School District.
That's good, because I was going to ask you, what is your, you know, as we're wrapping up, your clarion call or your request, you know, I was going to ask you if you could do that. So we heard that, and Bishop, any final words as well?
I think this is a good critical conversation.
Yeah, it is. It
Because
really
I think we do need to hear from you, and you have made yourself available, and I appreciate that, and I'm sure our community appreciates that. You're not just in your office, but you're in the community. You are having conversations with our faith-based leaders. I know that because I'm there, and even other agencies and other entities. And I think that's important because, again, you all know it takes a village to raise our children, and we've kind of gotten away from that.
We have.
But we can still do it in a very strategic way.
Yeah.
We may not do it in the way we used to, but we can do it through our strategic partnerships with our churches and all of our other faith-based organizations and even in our schools.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be the key to turning this thing around.
Yeah.
Is all of us rolling up our sleeves and jumping in here and doing what we can to make this better.
Yeah.
I do have one shameless plug.
Yeah.
The Capital School District is about to open up a $113 million interconnected middle school where the old high school was, right? And so we'll be opening up the Dover Middle School campus with the Middle School for Excellence and the Middle School for Innovation. And we will be launching our strategic planning process. So I am putting out a call of action for people to be involved in helping us develop our new strategic plan. Every organization has a plan that talks about its vision for its services that it provides. Our work is around increasing student outcomes, getting kids into college or into careers or into the military. And so I am urging everyone to get involved because we're about to embark on an era of advancing excellence through innovation as we take our schools into the 21st century. You want to be involved because the entire district will change. We will reconfigure the entire district the fall of 2023, in which we will have a pre-KK building. We will have, the elementary schools will shift to grades 1 through 5, and the new Dover Middle School campus will house 1,800 6th through 8th grade students. You don't want to miss out on the opportunity to be at the table, to have your input and your say. And so that's my shameless plug. Our state-of-the-art new middle school campus is opening in the fall. We're launching our strategic plan this fall as we develop our plans for reorganizing our entire district. Be there or get left out.
That's awesome. And you know, we'll wrap it up, but I think I was just having a conversation with someone about our district and that area of like innovation, like the schools literally being focused on that and preparing our students. So I'm so excited, you know, to hear about that as well. My son, I think he's gonna miss it because he's going into the 8th grade now, so he'll be in the 9th and everything. But
The Taj Mahal. Dover High School is still the Taj Mahal.
Yeah, that
It's
sounds
still our centerpiece.
right. Yeah. Well, Dr. Cade, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah. And Bishop Thomas, thank you. Thank you so much. As always, we want to thank our media team. Certainly thank everybody that came here in person. We certainly much appreciate it, and we thank you guys for joining us online. I think Candace had mentioned it in the beginning, but this is our first one, Critical Conversations. So even if you want to put it in the chat, what are some other conversations you want to see us have, right? So we'll continue with Bible study, but periodically throughout the year, we'll have panel discussions. We'll invite different persons to come join us. So what are some critical conversations? We feel like mental health is, just we can probably sit here all day and talk about mental health and unfold that. But if you have an idea of some things that you want to see us talk about, please send it our way as well. Share, share. So this one here, if you're watching us live, or even if you are watching, next week or something like that, please remember to share. So don't just like, but please share as well. People need to hear this message that we're talking about. Dr. Cade and Bishop Thomas unfolded so many different things. So, Bishop Thomas, I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Again, thank you all. And we look forward again to having these conversations because we want to make sure that we are an informed people. That's so important. It's not just what we do in the walls of the church, but it's what we do in the community. In order to do that, we have to be informed. And so this platform, that's what this platform is designed to do, is to inform not just the members of our church, but the members of our community. So thank you for taking the time to do this. It's new, it's different, you got to get used to it, but it's necessary.
Yes.
That's why we call it Critical Conversations. So again, thank you for joining us. We'll be back in our regular Bible study on next week. Our new Bible study series is Discerning God's Call. And so we'll be talking about how we identify what it is that God has called us to do. So I want to invite you to join us online and in person starting next week for our regular Bible study. But we will periodically, as Elder said, interrupt our regular schedule to have these critical conversations. So again, thank you for joining us. We pray you have a great week, and we'll look forward to seeing you Sunday, 9:30 a.m., virtually or in person. Y'all have a blessed week. God bless you, and God keep you. That's our prayer.
Amen. Bishop?
Yes.